very interesting study and a good presentation too. So I have a couple of questions about the frequency. So I know you have used 1 Hz and 10 Hz, right? And can you tell us why you choose those two frequencies? And what's it compared to the clinical situation?
Well, first of all, this is kind of a pioneering study because it's the first time we look at DMA or dynamic mechanical testing of elastomeric chains. Most of the studies done using DMA in the past on dental materials have been on composites, dental amalgam, stuff like that. And generally they've used 1 Hz frequency because it mimics the chewing frequency as well. So we decided to use that to cross-reference as well.
Right. So we used a range of frequencies from 125 up to 16 Hz. So we wanted to just get an idea of what the frequency effects were, and it was partly convenience because those were frequencies that our testing machine could accommodate easily. If it would have gone a lot higher, the testing, we would have not been able to test at the amplitude that we tested at.
So my second question is, almost all the properties you tested increased with the frequency. What's your explanation to that?
That's our committee question.
It's actually
You expected that.
It is expected for polyurethane type materials, and it's actually expected. Yes.
An example would be actually silly putty. If you stretch it out slowly, the loss of energy is actually more. But then when you increase the frequency, or you snap it real quickly, then it becomes really stiff and it breaks quicker as well.
My gosh, we have a kind group. I expect that. Yes.
As far as the brands, and you were talking about manufacturing differences, how much do you know, or the companies disclose to you on how they made them? Or was it obvious by looking at them if they were injection or standard?
Very good question. Most of the details it is proprietary, but if you actually take a look at the chains themselves, if they're injection molded, they would have more rounded edges to them. If they're die cut or stamped, they would have sharper edges too. And I do know for a fact that all 3 of them were die cut because the reps were actually kind enough to give that.
They divulge that.
I'm sorry, just a
Sure,
follow-up.
sure.
Did you then, so you have 3 cheese that were that, did you think about adding one that was,
Injections.
yeah, injection?
That is an excellent question. It could be another study down the road. There have been other studies that looked at the differences or effects of injection molded versus die cut in vivo, and they actually found no differences in that aspect from the same manufacturer. So.
And these were major companies, really.
Yeah.
Very nice, thank you.
Thank you.
Alan, I think you had something.
Yeah, so how would you go about isolating the effects of the different size of the chains versus the composition of the chains? Because it looked like the GAC chains, which were the smallest, at least on the initial one, were also had the highest stiffness values too. At least
Actually, sorry.
stiffness and elasticity.
GAC actually was the thickest of all the different brands, and hence it kind of makes intuitive sense that they would have more stiffness, but they ended up actually losing as well more energy. You would just have to be careful for the next study, pick out a brand that actually is very consistent in their dimensions. I think both of us were surprised that even within the same brand there are differences among the same different colors as well. So.
But it made it more interesting.
Yes.
So can I ask now or
Now and later.
Okay, this question actually will be very useful for other audience. That's why I want to ask. Can you define what is the structural property and material property. What's the difference between these two? That is kind of key point of this study.
Absolutely.
So that is the first question. Yeah.
Absolutely. All of the actual data presented here is only applicable to the specimens that we tested. They are structural properties, and that is because of the irregular specimen geometry that we have. The cross-section is just irregular, so we aren't able to convert those numbers into modulus values. We have to focus on stiffness values that are structural properties.
Yeah, that means it's kind of in situ type of study, not the kind of material science stuff. So second question is, if you take a look at the graph, the frequency increase, some kind of pattern you find already, just decrease or increase. But just one parameter didn't follow that pattern, was tangent delta. There is a first kind of decrease and up with the frequency. So you find out which hertz, which is the frequency did you find the lowest tangent delta?
It's around 1 to 2, around 1.
Yeah, that one is most like in a physiological frequency, right? That is a kind of interesting finding you can just focus on, I guess. So.
Correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't bone behave the same way as well? Kind of for T
Yes.
delta?
Yes, that's why I bring up this issue. Bone also have that range in very low tangent delta. So I just wonder, this structure itself is a follow that kind of frequency in the matching, but I'm not so sure. I should ask it.
And we can explore that in the next.
Yeah.
Let's be
How, you showing us the means of at the points of the multiple specimens, is that right? What you were showing us on that? Right. So how much variation was there at each point there?
We would have to go back to the data and plot the standard deviations on that. It varies from one variable to the next and one color and brand to the next.
So you're telling me that it's not very reliable? Is that what you're telling me? Or not?
Maybe not. We'd have to look at the data tables and go through.
Some people will put bar on the ratio, but you have standard deviation values in the table.
Yeah, they are in the tables.
Yeah.
But that was for the physical dimensions that we saw. But there must be other ones.
We
Okay.
do have
But that'd be
those.
some index of how reliable or the variability.
We do have that, but the information is so enormous, we can fit everything
To
in
keep
there,
it in
but
within
more than
that,
happy
they
to
actually have
show
stat
you that.
figures.
Well, if the dimensions are different, is there a way to manipulate the data to account for that?
We actually thought about that, and then we thought better of it. It was going to double and triple the magnitude of the amounts of data that we had to deal with, and it may or may not have been very relevant, because we could have corrected, say, for the thickness only, but that wouldn't account for the differences in the lengths and the diameters.
So I just want to.
But if you did it stepwise, couldn't you see where the biggest, what had the most impact in general? The magnitude of the impact of a different variable, of one of those variables could have been.
That is what I about to say actually. That variation. There are a couple of things you should correct. Actually, that is for the committee member question. But actually, first of all, you should make a correlation between these parameters, and then just normalize out some point. And second one is like Dr. Phil just said, is a stepwise analysis, and you find out most the important factor you found, and then using that factor you should normalize. And third one actually is the tangent delta. That is a relative value. That is not the single absolute value. That is storage modulus divided by kind of loss modulus, something like that. So that would represent some account for that variation too. So you should think about a couple of ways like to compensate your data.
More questions? It was fitting to Dr. Phil's. We will invite the guests to leave and we'll continue.
Thank you all.
Thank you.